The woman with green skin and small tusks jutting from her lower jaw sat on the hiring bench in the market square, watching men avoid her gaze as they passed, and wondered if this season would be the one that finally broke her. Cara Calloway owned 80 acres of the meanest clay soil in 3 counties, land that fought back against every plow blade and swallowed rain like a miser hoarding coins. She had inherited it from her father, who had won it in a card game from a human farmer too drunk to know he was betting land that barely deserved the name. Her father had worked it for 15 years before a falling tree took him, and now it was hers, along with the lease payment due every harvest, and the knowledge that most men would rather starve than take orders from an orc woman. The last applicant had walked off after 3 days. The one before that had lasted a week before deciding his pride was worth more than wages. Cara needed help. The spring planting was already late, and she could not work every hour of daylight alone, no matter how much her body insisted she try. A man approached the bench. He was thin, with brown hair going gray at the temples and a face that might have been handsome before something had carved lines of permanent weariness into it. He moved carefully, as though his body was a burden he had learned to carry with caution. "The board says you are hiring," he said. His voice was quiet, almost apologetic for existing. "Farm labor," Cara said. 80 acres, clay soil, spring planting through harvest, room and board plus wages at the end of season if the crop comes in. The man nodded. "My name is Walter Ingram. I can work." Cara gestured at the sacks of seed grain stacked beside the bench, each one a test she had learned to administer early. "Show me." Walter bent, wrapped both arms around one of the sacks, and tried to lift. His face went white. His back made a sound like green wood crackling in fire, and he let go, stepping back with one hand pressed to his spine. "I cannot lift heavy," he said, meeting her eyes with a dignity that surprised her. "I took a wagon tongue to the back 2 years ago, healed wrong, but I can work." Just not that kind of work. Cara felt the hope that had stirred when he approached sink back down into the familiar mud of disappointment. "This is a farm. Everything is heavy." "I was a company cook for 12 years, Walter said. 2nd Infantry, then the Thorndale Mercantile Guard. I know how to make a sack of barley feed 20 men 9 different ways. I know which weeds are edible and which ones will kill you. I can keep a kitchen, maintain tools, mend harness, manage stores, and if you have livestock, I can dose them for most ailments. I can do the work that lets you do the heavy work, and I will work every hour you need me to work." Cara studied him. His hands were scarred but clean. His clothes were patched but not ragged. He stood like a man who had spent years standing at attention and could not quite break the habit. 9 ways, she said. "Beg pardon? You said 9 ways to make barley worth eating. Tell me." Walter blinked, then something that might have been humor flickered behind his eyes. "Barley porridge with honey if you have it, with salt if you do not. Barley bread if you have yeast and patience. Barley flat cakes if you have neither. Barley soup with whatever vegetables and bones you can spare. Barley roasted dry and ground into flour for stretching wheat. Barley boiled with apples until it goes soft, sweetened if possible. Barley mixed with oats to make the oats go further. Barley sprouted and cooked young for when you are heartily sick of the taste of barley. And barley beer, which is the best way, though it takes time and is a poor use of grain unless you have plenty." Despite herself, despite the lateness of the season and the weight of the coming work, Cara laughed. It came out as a short bark of sound, startling in the quiet square. 2 merchants glanced over, then quickly away when they saw her tusks. "You are hired," she said. "Not for field labor. For everything else. I need someone to keep the house standing while I try to make this season work. Can you do that?" "Yes," Walter said simply. "The pay is the same. The work might be harder." "I understand." Cara stood, and Walter stepped back slightly. She was not tall for an orc, barely 5.5 feet, but she was broad across the shoulders from years of labor, and she had learned that humans often needed space to feel safe around her. "We leave now. The farm is 6 miles south. Do you have belongings?" "A pack at the boarding house." "Get it. Meet me at the south fountain in 1 hour." Walter nodded and turned away, moving with that same careful precision. Cara watched him go and felt the unfamiliar stirring of something that might have been optimism, or might just have been desperation finding a new shape to wear. The sun was past its height when they reached the farm. The main house was small, built of stone and timber by someone who had valued durability over comfort. The field stretched out behind it, 80 acres of gray-brown earth broken by the occasional stubborn rock. A barn leaned slightly to the east, and a well stood in the yard, its rope frayed but functional. "There," Cara said, pointing. "That is everything." Walter set down his pack and looked around with the slow, assessing gaze of someone who had learned to inventory a situation before speaking. "The barn needs bracing. That lean will get worse, I know." "When did you last have the chimney swept?" 2 years. "That will need doing before winter, and the kitchen garden has gone to weeds." Cara felt a flash of irritation rise and forced it down. He was not criticizing. He was simply noting the way a cook would note that supplies were low. "I have been busy with the fields." "Of course," Walter said, and there was no judgment in his voice. "Show me the house." The interior was sparse. A main room with a hearth, a table, 2 chairs. A small bedroom off to one side where Cara slept. A loft above that held nothing but dust and the memory of her father's presence. "You can take the loft," Cara said. "There is a mattress somewhere. Might have mice." "I have slept in worse places," Walter said. He set his pack down and looked at the hearth, the shelves, the water barrel. "Do you have stores? Grain, salt, preserved meat?" "Some. In the root cellar." "May I see?" Cara led him outside to the cellar door set into the ground near the house. Inside, the cool darkness held 3 barrels of grain, one of them nearly empty. A haunch of salted pork hung from a hook. Onions and withered turnips lay on shelves. It was not much. It was never much. Walter descended the steps and examined each barrel, lifting lids and sniffing contents. "The rye has weevils," he said. "Not too far gone, I can salvage most of it. The wheat is good, barley is low." "I know what I have," Cara said, more sharply than she intended. Walter looked up at her, and his expression was unreadable in the dim light. "I am not finding fault. I am understanding what there is to work with. That is what cooks do." Cara felt the tightness in her chest ease slightly. "I am not used to someone else in my house." "I will try to take up little space," Walter said quietly, and climbed back up into the sunlight. The first week passed in a rhythm of mutual caution. Cara rose before dawn and went to the fields, working the clay soil with a determination that bordered on fury. Walter rose with her, made breakfast from oats and the end of the preserved pork, and spent his days putting the house in order. He swept the chimney, coaxing down 2 years of creosote and a dead bird. He cleared the kitchen garden and turned the soil, planting seeds from packets he said he had been saving. He mended the frayed well rope and replaced 3 boards in the barn wall. He moved slowly, carefully, always mindful of his back, but he moved constantly, and the work got done. In the evenings, Cara returned to find the house warmer, cleaner, more orderly than it had been in the 2 years since her father died. She found meals waiting, simple but hot and filling. She found her tools cleaned and sharpened, her harness mended, her work clothes patched where they had torn. They spoke little. Walter seemed to have no need for conversation, and Cara had forgotten how to make it. but the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people accustomed to work, who understood that words were not always necessary. On the 8th day, Cara came in from the fields to find Walter standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot that smelled of herbs and barley. The table was laid with 2 wooden bowls and 2 spoons. A loaf of bread, dark and dense, sat on a board. "Sit," Walter said without turning around. Cara hesitated. In her father's time they had eaten standing up or sitting on the front step, or not at all if the work demanded it. The idea of sitting at a laid table felt foreign, almost luxurious. "I am filthy," she said. "There is water in the basin. Wash if you like or do not. Food does not care." Cara washed her hands and face in the basin Walter had filled and left by the door. The water was cold and clean and felt like a benediction. She sat at the table and Walter ladled stew into her bowl, then his own, and sat across from her. The stew was thick with barley and turnips, and something green that Cara did not recognize. It tasted of salt and herbs and the kind of care that could make plain food into something worth savoring. "What is the green?" she asked. "Wild garlic from the edge of the woods, and nettles boiled first to take out the sting." Cara ate 3 bowls. Walter ate 1 and watched her with quiet satisfaction. "You do not eat much," Cara observed. "I am accustomed to eating after everyone else has had their fill. Old habits. This is good food. Thank you." That night, lying in her bed, Cara found herself thinking about the way the house felt different. Not just cleaner or more orderly, but inhabited in a way it had not been since her father died. She was not sure if she liked it or resented it. Perhaps both. Spring gave way to early summer. The fields demanded everything Cara had. She plowed and harrowed and planted, working from first light to last, pushing her body until her muscles screamed and her hands bled from the plow handles. The clay fought her for every furrow, but slowly, painfully, the fields turned from gray to brown to the faint green of emerging crops. Walter kept the house running. He baked bread twice a week. He tended the kitchen garden until it produced lettuce, radishes, and the first hopeful shoots of beans. He walked to the village once a week to trade work for supplies, mending harness for the saddler in exchange for leather scraps, sharpening knives for the butcher in exchange for bones and fat. He never complained. He never asked for more than his share. He never looked at Cara with anything other than a calm, patient attention that she did not quite know how to interpret. In late May, Cara came in from the fields at midday to refill her water flask and found Walter in the kitchen, gutting a chicken he had somehow acquired. His hands moved with the easy precision of long practice, separating meat from bone, saving every scrap. "Where did you get that?" Cara asked. "Traded the saddler some nettle tea for his wife's headaches. He insisted I take a chicken in thanks." "Nettle tea. It helps with the pain in her joints. I made a pouch of it and showed her how to steep it." Cara leaned against the doorframe, suddenly aware of how little she knew about this man who had been living in her house for 2 months. "You know herb craft, a little. You learn it cooking for soldiers. Someone is always sick or hurt and the surgeon is often drunk or dead. You use what is available. Were you in many battles?" Walter's hands paused for just a moment, then resumed their work. "Enough." Something in his tone made Cara drop the subject. She filled her flask and went back to the fields, but the question stayed with her. Summer settled in with heat that baked the clay fields hard as stone. The crops grew, thin and stubborn, reaching for the sun. Cara watered them by hand when the rain did not come, hauling buckets from the well until her shoulders felt like hot iron. She worked until she could barely stand, and then she worked longer, because the lease payment was due at harvest, and there was no mercy for those who fell short. On a day in mid-June, She came in at dusk so tired that she could not feel her legs. The sun had been brutal, and the work had been worse. She had turned over a third of the south field by herself, wrestling the plow through soil that resisted every step. The smell hit her before she reached the door. Something savory and rich, laced with herbs. Her stomach twisted with hunger so sharp it was almost painful. She pushed open the door and stopped. The table was laid with both bowls and a platter in the center. Candles burned in holders she had not known she possessed. Walter stood at the stove, his back to her, stirring a pot with slow, steady motions. "Sit," he said without turning. "Supper is almost ready." Cara stood in the doorway, unsure. Her hands hung at her sides, heavy and useless. She did not know what to do with them. She did not know what to do with this, with the care implicit in the laid table and the lit candles and the food that waited. "I should wash," she said, her voice coming out rough. "Water is ready in the basin." Cara washed mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When she sat at the table, Walter brought the pot over and ladled stew onto the platter. It was thick with vegetables from the garden and chunks of the chicken, cooked until the meat fell from the bone. He sat across from her and gestured for her to eat. Cara picked up her spoon, took a bite, and felt something in her chest crack open. It was not just the food, though the food was good. It was the fact of it. The fact that someone had spent time and care making this for her. The fact that she had come home to a warm house and a hot meal and did not have to stand at the stove herself, exhausted, forcing her body through one more task. "Why?" she asked, and hated the tremor in her voice. Walter looked at her with those steady, tired eyes. "Because you have been working since before dawn, because you need to eat, because this is my job. Your job is to keep the house. Yes, and you are part of the house." Cara ate in silence, unable to find words for the tangle of emotions in her chest. Gratitude, confusion, something that might have been anger at her own vulnerability. She finished 2 helpings and sat back, feeling the exhaustion settle into her bones like a physical weight. "Thank you," she said quietly. Walter nodded and began to clear the table. That night, Cara lay awake in her bed, listening to the small sounds of Walter moving in the loft above. She thought about the way he had stood at the stove, steady and unhurried, the way he had looked at her with patience rather than expectation, the way he had made a place in her house without taking up space that was not his. She thought about trust, and what it cost, and what it might be worth. 3 days later, she woke in the middle of the night with a pain in her chest like a knife between her ribs. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps that did not seem to bring enough air. Fever burned through her skin, turning the world into a haze of heat and confusion. She tried to rise, to get to the fields because the work could not wait. Her legs folded under her, and she went down hard on the stone floor. Walter found her there an hour later when he came down to start the breakfast fire. She heard his voice from a great distance, felt his hands careful on her shoulders, and then there was nothing but the fever and the dark. She woke in her bed with sunlight slanting through the window and no memory of how she had gotten there. Her chest felt like it was wrapped in hot iron bands, and breathing was an act of will. Walter sat on a stool beside the bed, wringing out a cloth in a basin of cool water. When he saw her eyes open, he laid the cloth on her forehead. "How long?" Cara asked, and her voice was a ruined whisper. 2 days. You have pleurisy, inflammation of the lung lining. It is serious. The fields are not dying. Lie still. I have to, no." Walter's voice was firm, almost hard. "You have to rest. If you go out now, you will collapse in the field and die there, and then there will be no harvest at all." Cara tried to sit up. The pain in her chest flared white-hot, and she fell back with a gasp. "How long?" she asked again. 6 weeks if you rest. Longer if you do not. Possibly never if you are foolish," 6 weeks. The words fell on her like stones. 6 weeks meant the lease payment might not come in. 6 weeks meant losing everything her father had died trying to keep. "I cannot afford 6 weeks," she said. "You cannot afford to die," Walter replied, and there was something in his voice that silenced her protests. The days blurred together in fever and pain. Walter brought broth, water, herb tea that tasted bitter but seemed to ease the fire in her chest. He changed the linens when they soaked through with sweat. He opened the window when she burned and closed it when she shivered. He spoke little, but his presence was constant, a quiet anchor in the storm of her illness. On the 5th day, the fever broke. Cara woke clear-headed for the first time, weak as a newborn but aware. The light coming through the window was midday bright. She heard voices outside. Walter's, low and measured. Another voice, deeper, with the rough accent of the Orc clans from the hills. A third voice, younger, laughing at something. Cara struggled to sit up, got her legs over the side of the bed, and stood. The room tilted. She grabbed the bedpost and waited for the world to steady. Through the window, she could see the fields. 2 figures moved through the rows, one tall and broad, the other lean and quick. Both had green skin. Both were working her land. She made it to the door, across the main room, and outside before her strength gave out. She sat down hard on the step, breathing carefully around the pain in her chest. Walter appeared from the barn. When he saw her, his expression flickered through surprise, concern, and resignation. "You should be in bed," he said. "Who are they?" Cara demanded, gesturing at the fields. "Derek and Mara, your clan cousins. They came looking for you 3 days ago." "I hired them." "With what money?" "With a promise of shares in the harvest, 1 part in 10 for each of them." Cara stared at him. "You had no right." "I had the right of someone trying to keep you alive and your farm solvent," Walter said, and there was an edge to his voice she had not heard before. "You were dying, Cara. The crops needed tending. I cannot do field labor. So I found people who could, and I struck the best bargain I was able to strike. If you wish to dismiss me for it, do so after you are well enough to manage without me." The 2 figures in the field had stopped working and were walking toward the house. As they drew closer, Cara recognized them. Derek was her second cousin, a steady man with a wife and children in the hill settlement. Mara was younger, barely 20, but strong and willing. "Cara," Derek said, his voice rough with relief. "You look like death." "I am improving," Cara said dryly. "Walter said you had pleurisy." "My aunt died of that. I am not dead yet." Mara crouched down beside the step, her yellow eyes bright with concern. "We are glad to help. The fields are coming along. Another 2 weeks and the worst of the work will be done." Cara looked from Mara to Derek to Walter, standing a few paces back with his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. She felt a complicated knot of gratitude and resentment and something else she could not name. "Thank you," she said finally. "Both of you." Derek nodded. "We are clan." "You would do the same." "I would." Walter stepped forward and took Cara's arm, his grip firm. "Back to bed. You have been up long enough." Cara let him guide her inside, too tired to argue. As he settled her back into the bed, she looked up at him. "You should have asked me first." "You were insensible with fever, still." "Would you have said no?" Cara considered. "No. Then the result is the same, and we have wasted words." Despite herself, Cara felt a smile tug at the corner of her mouth. "You are a strange man, Walter Ingram. I have been called worse." He turned to go, but Cara caught his wrist. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then at her face. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for all of it." Walter nodded once, and then he was gone, back to whatever work he had found to fill the hours. The days crept forward. Cara's strength returned slowly, stubbornly, like water seeping back into dry ground. She graduated from bed to chair, from chair to short walks around the house, from the house to the yard. She watched Derek and Mara work the fields with a competence that eased some of the terror in her chest, though not all of it. Walter moved through the house like a ghost, always busy, always quiet. He cooked meals for 4 now, filling the table with food that somehow stretched the stores without depleting them. He negotiated with Derek about which fields needed the most attention. He walked to the village and came back with news of grain prices, weather predictions, and the movements of the tax assessor. He ran her farm and he did it well. Cara tried to be grateful. She was grateful. But underneath, the gratitude was a growing unease, a sense that something had shifted while she lay fevered and helpless, and she did not know how to shift it back. On a morning 4 weeks into her recovery, she walked out to the fields. Her breath still came short, and her chest still ached if she moved wrong, but she could walk without dizziness, and that felt like victory. Mara was working the north field, hoeing weeds between the rows of young barley. She looked up when Cara approached and grinned. "You are upright. Good." "I am tired of being useless," Cara said. "You are healing. That is not useless." Mara handed her the hoe. "But if you want to help start at that end, go slow." Cara took the hoe and began to work. After 10 minutes, her arms trembled. After 20, her vision grayed at the edges. She stopped, leaning on the hoe, furious at her body's weakness. "Enough," Mara said, taking the hoe back. "You will heal faster if you do not push. I need to be strong enough to bring in the harvest. You will be." Walter said another 2 weeks. Walter said. Cara heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. Mara studied her with those 2 knowing eyes. "He has done well by you, Cara. I know." "Then why do you sound angry?" Cara looked out over the fields, at the neat rows and the healthy crops and the evidence of good management. "Everyone thinks he owns this place now. I went to the village yesterday and the miller asked me how my husband's farm was faring. I told him I have no husband and he laughed like I had made a joke. So, let them think what they will. It is my farm, Mara, my father's before me. My land, my lease, my debt. And now everyone sees Walter and assumes he is the master here and I am just the orc woman who works his fields." Mara was quiet for a moment, then she said, "Have you told him this?" "No. Perhaps you should." That evening, Cara waited until after supper. Derek and Mara had gone back to the village for the night, and the house was quiet. Walter was washing the dishes, his movements methodical and unhurried. "Walter," Cara said. "Yes. I need to say something, and I need you to hear it." Walter set down the dish he was holding and turned to face her, his expression attentive. "You saved my life," Cara said. "You saved the farm, I know that, and I am grateful, but this is my land, my house, my responsibility, and while I was sick, something changed. People in the village think you own this place. They ask after your farm, your crops, your plans. They look at me like I am your hired hand." Walter's face did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. "I have never claimed ownership. I have never presented myself as anything other than hired labor. I know, but they assume anyway, because you are a human man and I am an orc woman, and in their minds that is the only arrangement that makes sense." "What do you want me to do?" Walter asked quietly. Cara took a breath, feeling her way through the tangle of her own feelings. "I want you to make space. When you go to the village, you tell them this is my farm. When you make decisions, you ask me first, even if I am too weak to do anything but say yes. I want to still be the owner here, not just the woman who sleeps in the back room." Walter was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You are right. I have overstepped. Not in intention, but in effect. I will correct it." "I am not dismissing you," Cara said quickly. "I do not want you to go. I just need you to remember whose land this is." "I will remember," Walter said, and there was no defensiveness in his voice, no wounded pride, just acceptance. "I apologize. I grew accustomed to making decisions during the war and in the years after. It is a habit I should have broken." "You do not need to apologize. You kept everything running. I am alive because of you. And this is your land because you have fought for it," Walter said. "I will not forget that again." Something in Cara's chest loosened. She had expected anger, resentment, perhaps even for him to leave. Instead, he had simply listened, understood, and adjusted. It was a strange gift, that willingness to bend without breaking. "Thank you," she said. Walter nodded and returned to the dishes. The harvest came in late August, and it was better than Cara had dared to hope. The barley was thin but abundant, the wheat patchy but sufficient. Derek and Mara worked from dawn until dark, bringing in the sheaves and stacking them in the barn. Cara worked beside them, slower than she wanted but stronger than she had been, and felt the fierce satisfaction of work nearly done. Walter managed the house and the meals and kept track of yields, tallying numbers in a worn ledger he had unearthed from somewhere. On the day the last of the wheat came in, he presented Cara with the ledger and a calculation written in careful script. "If the grain prices hold where the miller says they will, you will have enough for the lease payment and a small surplus," he said. "Not much, but enough to see you through to spring." Cara looked at the numbers, at the neat columns and the careful accounting, and felt something shift in her chest. "This is good. It is better than good. It is survival. That is what I meant." Walter smiled, a small, tired expression that softened the lines of his face. "Then we have done what we set out to do." Derek and Mara left after the harvest, taking their shares in grain and coins and promises that Cara would send for them if she needed help again. The house felt empty without them, and yet also fuller, because now it was just Cara and Walter again, falling back into the rhythms they had established in the spring. But something had changed. Cara noticed it in small ways, the way Walter asked her opinion before going to the village, the way he deferred to her when Derek had questions about next year's planting, the way he described the farm to the miller as Mistress Calloway's land with a firmness that allowed no misunderstanding. He made space, as she had asked. And in making space, he somehow became more present, not less. They were sitting at the table one evening in late September, eating the last of the summer vegetables roasted with a rabbit Walter had snared, when Cara said, "The lease is paid. The farm is secure for another year." "That is good news," Walter said. "I could not have done it without you. You would have found a way, perhaps, but it would have been harder and I might have failed." Walter set down his fork and looked at her directly. "What are you saying?" Cara took a breath. "I am saying that I do not want you to leave when winter comes. I am saying that I want you to stay, not as hired labor but as something more, a partner perhaps, someone who has a stake in this place." Walter's expression was unreadable. "Why?" "Because you have earned it. Because you care for this land as much as I do. Because I trust you, and trust is not something I give easily." "I have no money to buy in," Walter said quietly. "I am not asking for money. I am asking for what you already give. Your work, your skill, your presence. This place runs better with you in it." Walter was silent for a long moment, and Cara felt her heart beat hard against her ribs. She had not realized how much his answer mattered until she was waiting for it. "I will stay," Walter said finally, "but not as a partner. Not yet. You have been alone for a long time, Cara. You are not used to sharing decisions, sharing space, sharing your life. If I stay as what I am now, and we see where it leads. If in a year you still wish to make me a partner, then we will discuss it." Cara felt a mixture of relief and frustration. "You do not need to wait a year." "Yes, I do, and so do you." He was right, and she knew it. She nodded slowly. "A year, then, but you stay." "I stay." They finished the meal in comfortable silence, and when Walter rose to clear the dishes, Cara rose with him and began to dry, working side by side at the basin in a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Winter settled over the farm like a gray blanket. The fields lay fallow, and the work shifted to maintenance and preparation. Walter spent his days mending tools, preserving food, and planning the next year's planting. Cara repaired the barn, reinforced the well housing, and hunted in the woods for meat to supplement their stores. They talked more in the long winter evenings, sitting by the fire while the wind howled outside. Walter told her stories of his years in the army, the places he had seen, the men he had cooked for. He spoke of battles with a soldier's detachment, focusing on logistics and supply lines rather than the violence itself. But Cara heard the things he did not say in the pauses between his words. She told him about her father, about growing up on the farm, about the way humans looked at her in the village, and the careful dance she had learned to navigate their prejudice without giving ground. She told him about the loneliness of working land that never quite felt like hers, because the law said it belonged to the landowner in the city who held the lease, and she was just a tenant who happened to be an orc. "It will be yours one day," Walter said. "Truly yours. Perhaps. If I can ever save enough to buy it outright, you will." His certainty was a balm against the doubt that lived in her chest. In late November, a drover came through, a grizzled man with a string of cattle bound for the city markets. He stopped at the farm to ask directions and stayed for a meal when he smelled Walter's cooking. "This is fine food," the drover said, sopping up stew with a piece of bread. "Better than I have had in a month on the road." "Thank you," Walter said. "You make this for the hands." "No hands. Just the two of us." The drover looked at Cara, then at Walter, then back at Cara with a speculative expression. "You are on the stock road here. Do you know how many drovers pass through, hungry and willing to pay for a hot meal?" Cara had not thought about it. "Many. Dozens, spring through fall. There is no proper inn for 20 miles in either direction, just cold camps and hard cheese." Walter glanced at Cara, and she saw the idea forming in his mind at the same moment it formed in hers. "A drover's table," she said slowly. "Here." "Your land, my kitchen," Walter said. "A declared partnership." The drover looked between them. "If you two did that, you would have business enough to make a profit, maybe a good profit." After the drover left, Cara and Walter sat at the table and talked late into the night. They would need to convert the front rooms, expand the table, acquire more dishes and supplies. They would need to build a reputation, spread the word along the stock road. It would be a risk, an investment of time and resources they barely had, but it would also be theirs. A venture built on both their strengths, on her land and his skill, on the partnership they had been building without quite naming it. "We would need to make it official," Cara said. "A partnership, shares split even." "Are you certain?" Walter asked. "I am certain. We do this together, or we do not do it at all." Walter extended his hand across the table. Cara took it, and they shook solemnly like generals making a treaty. "Partners," Walter said. "Partners," Cara agreed. They spent the winter preparing. Walter planned the menu, tested recipes, calculated costs and potential earnings. Cara converted the front rooms, building benches and expanding the table until it could seat 20 people at once. She walked to the village and hired a carpenter to help with the heavier work, paying him in promises of future meals. Word spread along the stock road through the network of drovers and traders. By the time spring arrived, they had a sign posted at the gate. "Callaway and Ingram, Drover's Table, hot meals, fair prices." The first drovers arrived in early April, a pair of weary men with a flock of sheep. They ate Walter's stew and bread and left coins on the table and promises to spread the word. More came the following week, and the week after that. By late April, they were serving meals 3 or 4 times a week. Walter cooked with the calm efficiency of a man doing what he was born to do. Cara managed the front room, greeted customers, kept order, and made sure everyone knew this was her land and her house. The drovers respected her in a way the villagers never had, perhaps because they were used to dealing with all kinds of people on the road, or perhaps because Walter made it clear from the beginning that Cara was the owner and he was the cook, and anyone who had a problem with that could eat elsewhere. The work was hard, but it was good work, the kind of work that built something rather than just holding back collapse. On a warm evening in late May, they served supper to a group of 20 drovers, the largest crowd yet. The table was full, the room loud with conversation and laughter. Walter moved between kitchen and table, bringing out platters of roasted meat and vegetables, fresh bread, pots of stew. Cara poured ale and collected coins and felt a fierce pride at the sight of her house full of people, her land supporting not just her survival but her prosperity. When the drovers finally left, the sun was setting and the house was a wreck of dirty dishes and crumbs. Cara looked at the mess and felt laughter bubble up in her chest. "We did it," she said. "We did," Walter agreed. They worked side by side at the washing up, falling into the easy rhythm they had developed over the past year. Cara washed, Walter dried. The pile of clean dishes grew slowly, steadily. "Walter," Cara said, not looking up from the basin. "Yes, will you marry me?" Walter's hand stilled on the plate he was drying. Cara glanced over and saw his expression, shocked and soft and almost painfully vulnerable. "What?" he said. "Will you marry me?" Cara repeated, meeting his eyes. "We are already partners. We already run this place together. I trust you and I think you trust me. And she paused, searching for the right words. "I want you to stay, not because you are hired or because it is convenient, but because you choose to, because you want to be here with me building this life." Walter set down the plate very carefully as though it might shatter. "Cara, I am 15 years older than you. I have a ruined back and no money and nothing to offer but my labor. You have offered me everything that matters," Cara said. "Your loyalty, your skill, your steady presence. You have given me space when I needed it and support when I needed that. You have made this house a home. That is worth more than money or a strong back." Walter's eyes shone in the candlelight, bright with something that might have been tears. "I would be honored," he said, his voice rough. "To marry you, to stay with you, to build this life together." Cara felt a smile spread across her face, wide and fierce. "Good." She leaned across the space between them and kissed him, awkward and sudden and sweet. Walter kissed her back, his hands coming up to cup her face, gentle despite the calluses and scars. When they pulled apart, Cara laughed, breathless. "That was my first kiss." "Mine as well," Walter said, "in all the ways that matter." They finished the washing up in companionable silence, hands brushing whenever they reached for the same dish. When the last plate was dried and stacked, Walter took Cara's hand and held it, his thumb tracing the line of her knuckles. "When?" he asked. "Winter," Cara said. "After the harvest is in and the drovers have thinned out, we can hold the wedding here in this room. Invite the clan and Derek and Mara and anyone from the village who will come." "A winter wedding," Walter said and smiled. "That suits us." The seasons turned. Summer brought heat and work, and a steady stream of drovers. Cara and Walter ran the table together, their partnership deepening into something that needed no words to explain. They moved around each other with practiced ease, anticipating needs, filling gaps, building a rhythm that felt as natural as the turn of the seasons. In the fall, they brought in the harvest with Derek and Mara's help, another good yield that filled the barn and the coffers. The lease was paid with money to spare, and Cara tucked the surplus away toward the eventual purchase of the land. It would take years, perhaps decades, but it was possible now in a way it had not been before. Winter came, and with it the wedding. They held it in the front room on a cold December afternoon, with the table pushed to the side and the fire burning high. Derek and Mara came, along with a dozen clan members. A few villagers came as well, the ones who had come to respect Cara through her dealings at the market and her fair treatment of everyone who came through her door. The ceremony was simple, conducted by an elder from the Orc settlement who spoke the old words of binding and partnership. Cara wore a dress she had borrowed from Mara, deep blue and embroidered with silver thread. Walter wore his best shirt, mended and pressed, and stood beside her with a steady presence that made her heart feel too big for her chest. They spoke their vows in the language of the valley, promising loyalty, partnership, and care. They exchanged no rings, having no money for such things, but they clasped hands and spoke the words that bound them, and that was enough. Afterward, they served a feast. Walter had been cooking for days, preparing dishes that filled the house with warmth and abundance. There was roasted meat and stewed vegetables, fresh bread and sweet cakes, ale and cider, and a special barley beer that Walter had brewed in secret and aged in the cellar. The celebration lasted until late in the night, full of music and laughter and the kind of joy that comes from watching two people find each other against the odds. When the last guests finally left, Cara and Walter stood in the doorway, watching the lanterns bob away into the darkness. "Well, husband," Cara said, trying out the word. "Well, wife," Walter replied and pulled her close. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's warmth before going back inside to the house that was now undeniably, unquestionably theirs. The years that followed were not easy. The land was still hard clay, the work still demanding. There were lean seasons and unexpected expenses, harsh winters and droughts that tested their resolve. But they faced it together, two people who had learned to build something strong from modest beginnings and stubborn determination. The drovers' table thrived. Word spread along the stock roads, and soon they were known as a reliable stop for good food and fair treatment. They expanded the barn to stable horses for drovers who needed to rest their animals. They hired help during the busy seasons, young orc workers from the clan and a few humans from the village who had learned to respect Cara's authority. In the third year of their marriage, Cara walked to the landowner's agent in the city and asked what it would take to purchase the farm outright. The amount was staggering but not impossible. She set a goal, 10 years, perhaps 12. They would save every spare coin, reinvest every profit, and one day the land would be hers free and clear. Walter supported the goal with the same quiet determination he brought to everything. He found ways to stretch their supplies further, to serve more customers with less waste. He bartered his skills in the village, trading meals and remedies for goods they needed. He kept the books with meticulous care, tracking every coin that came in and went out. On a spring morning in their 5th year of marriage, Cara woke to the smell of bread baking and the sound of Walter moving in the kitchen. She lay in bed for a moment, listening, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. She rose and dressed and went out to the kitchen. Walter was at the stove stirring porridge, his hair more gray now than brown. He glanced over when he heard her footsteps and smiled. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," Cara replied and kissed his cheek. They ate breakfast together at the small table in the kitchen, the table they used when it was just the two of them and not the larger one in the front room for customers. The morning sun slanted through the window, turning the steam from their porridge into gold. "Drovers today?" Cara asked. Not until afternoon if the schedule holds. We have the morning. Good. I want to walk the south field, check the drainage. I will come with you. They walked the field together, hand in hand, inspecting the land they had worked so hard to keep. The clay soil had improved over the years with careful management and the addition of compost from the kitchen and barn. The crops grew stronger each season and the yields increased, slowly but surely. "It looks good," Walter said. "It does," Cara agreed. "We have done well." "You have done well. This was always your land, your vision." Cara squeezed his hand. "Our land, our vision. I could not have done any of this without you." Walter looked at her with those steady, tired eyes that had seen so much and still held kindness. "I am glad I took a chance on that hiring bench." "So am I," Cara said, and meant it with every part of her heart. They stood together in the field, two people who had built a life from exhaustion and determination, and the willingness to trust each other with the things that mattered most. The sun climbed higher. The day opened before them, and they turned back toward the house to begin the work that waited, ready to face it together as they had faced everything else. In their 8th year of marriage, Cara counted the coins in the strongbox and realized they were closer to buying the land than she had thought. Another 3 years, perhaps 4, and they would have enough. She shared the news with Walter over supper, and his face lit with a pride that made her chest ache. "You will own this place outright," he said. "As you always should have." "We will own it," Cara corrected. "You and I, partners." Walter reached across the table and took her hand. "Partners," he agreed. That night, lying in bed with Walter's arm around her and the sound of the wind in the trees outside, Cara thought about all the things that had brought her to this moment. Her father's stubbornness, her own desperation, a hiring bench in a market square. A man with a ruined back who could recite 9 ways to make barley worth eating. The smell of supper cooking when she came home exhausted from the fields. The slow building of trust, partnership, and something deeper than either. She thought about the future, about the land that would one day be truly hers, about the drover's table that would keep growing, about the possibility of children if fortune allowed, though neither of them had spoken of it yet. She thought about the life she had built with Walter, brick by careful brick, and felt a gratitude so fierce it was almost overwhelming. "Walter," she said quietly into the darkness. "Yes, thank you for all of it, for staying, for making this life with me." Walter pressed a kiss to her temple. "There is nowhere else I would rather be." Cara closed her eyes and let sleep take her, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow would come and they would face it together, as they had faced every day since the moment he walked up to that hiring bench and changed the course of her life. The years continued to turn, and the farm prospered. In their 10th year of marriage, Cara walked to the city with a leather pouch heavy with coins and a heart full of determination. She met with the landowner, a tired man in expensive clothes who seemed surprised that an orc woman had come to buy land. "You have the full amount?" he asked, skeptical. Cara poured the coins onto his desk, gold and silver that represented a decade of work, sacrifice, and careful saving. "I do." The landowner counted it twice, then drew up the papers. Cara signed her name carefully, the signature she had practiced for this moment, and watched him seal the deed. When he handed it to her, she held it like the precious thing it was. "The land is yours, Mistress Calloway," the landowner said. "Free and clear." "Thank you," Cara said, and walked out into the sunlight with the deed clutched in her hand. She rode home through the spring afternoon, the deed safe in her pack, and felt a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. When she reached the farm, Walter was in the kitchen preparing for the evening's customers. She walked in and set the deed on the table in front of him. "It is done," she said. "The land is ours." Walter looked at the deed, then at her, and his face transformed with a joy that matched her own. He stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Cara felt the decade of work and worry and hope collapse into this single perfect moment. "We did it," Walter said, his voice rough with emotion. "We did," Cara agreed. That evening they served supper to a group of drovers as usual, but everything felt different. The house was theirs. The land was theirs. The future was theirs to shape as they saw fit. After the drovers left, Cara and Walter stood in the yard under the stars, arms around each other, looking out over the fields that stretched into the darkness. "What do we do now?" Walter asked. "We keep going," Cara said. "We keep building. We keep making this place something worth having." "That sounds good," Walter said, and kissed her under the wide expanse of the sky. The seasons turned, and life continued in the steady rhythm they had built. The drovers' table remained successful, providing income through the traveling seasons. The crops came in year after year, better each time as the soil improved. They hired more help and eventually built a small bunkhouse for seasonal workers. In their 12th year of marriage, Cara realized she was pregnant. She told Walter on a quiet evening in early autumn when the harvest was in and the house was peaceful. He stared at her for a long moment, then swept her into a careful embrace, his hands gentle on her back. "Are you well?" he asked. "Are you certain?" "I am certain, and I am well." "Tired but well." "We will need to prepare," Walter said, his mind already turning to logistics. "The birthing supplies, a cradle, someone from the clan who knows midwifery." Cara laughed, loving him for his immediate shift to practical concerns. "We have months yet. There is time." But Walter prepared anyway, with the same thorough care he brought to everything. He converted a corner of their bedroom into a space for the child, building a cradle with wood from the barn and his own careful hands. He consulted with Mara and the other orc women about what would be needed, stockpiling supplies and learning what he could. The baby came in late spring, a girl with green skin and her father's steady eyes. They named her Brenna, and she fit into their lives as though she had always been meant to be there. Walter was a careful, attentive father, carrying Brenna in a sling while he cooked and rocking her to sleep in the evenings. Cara watched him with their daughter and felt her heart expand to hold yet more love than she had thought possible. The farm adjusted around the new addition. Drovers cooed over the baby when they came through, and the orc workers from the clan took turns helping with childcare. Brenna grew up surrounded by the smells of cooking and the sounds of the drovers' table, by the sight of fields and the feel of her parents' steady presence. 2 years later, a second daughter arrived, a girl they named Flora. She was louder than Brenna, more demanding but no less loved. The house was full now in a way it had never been, full of children's laughter and toys and the beautiful chaos of a family. Walter adapted the kitchen to allow him to cook with children underfoot. Cara taught the girls to love the land, taking them into the fields as soon as they were old enough to walk. They grew up knowing that the farm was theirs, that their parents had built it from nothing and determination, and that it would one day pass to them. On a summer evening when Brenna was 5 and Flora 3, Cara sat on the front step with Walter, watching the girls chase fireflies in the yard. The sun was setting, turning the sky gold and pink, and the air was warm with the promise of a good season. "You ever regret it?" Walter asked quietly. Cara looked at him, surprised. "Regret what? This life, the farm, marrying me. You could have had an easier path." Cara shook her head. "There is no easier path. There is only the path that is mine, and this is the one I chose." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I have never regretted it, not once, not for a single moment." Walter smiled, that small, tired smile she had come to love above all others. "Neither have I." They sat together as the light faded and the girls played, and Cara felt the weight of all they had built settle around her like a blessing. The land that was theirs, the house full of love and work and purpose, the children who carried their future forward. It was not an easy life, but it was a good one. It was the life they had made together, and that made it worth every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. As the stars began to appear overhead, Cara leaned her head on Walter's shoulder and watched her daughters dance through the summer evening. And she knew with a certainty that reached into her bones that this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and earned and infinitely precious. "Come on," Walter said eventually, standing and offering her his hand. "Let us get the girls to bed." Cara took his hand and rose, calling to Brenna and Flora. They came running, breathless and giggling, and Walter scooped them both up despite the protest from his back, carrying them inside while they squealed with delight. Cara followed, closing the door behind her on the warm summer night, and the house embraced them all, solid and safe and filled with the life they had built together. She helped Walter settle the girls into bed, kissing each small forehead and tucking blankets around sleepy limbs. Then she and Walter returned to the kitchen, where tomorrow's bread dough waited to be set, and the ever-present work of the farm continued. But tonight, the work felt light. Tonight, everything felt exactly as it should be. And as Cara worked beside her husband in the kitchen they had shared for so many years, she felt the story of their life together settle into place, complete and whole and exactly as it was always meant to be.